So here in New York, it was just the mayoral primaries, and more than likely, Eric Adams is going to be our next.
You can look at a jewelry box. A jewelry box of this nature, maybe a simple jewelry box, but if you look through it closely, you don't know what your child may be hiding. For instance, a gun could be hidden, a small caliber weapon could be hidden inside a jewelry box.
More than likely, Eric Adams is going to be our next mayor. And the thing about him is that he's a former cop, former Republican. A key feature of his campaign was public safety, and so he was the favorite of people who feel that violent crime is a dominant threat to New Yorkers.
Some candid comments coming from the NYPD's top cop following a weekend crime spree marred by gun violence across our city.
Rapes increased 6%.
We started to see this rise in crime before the pandemic.
Transit crime, 11%.
The second rider pulls out a large knife, stabs the victim in the back.
Robberies were up 2%.
But being worried about crime in the city makes sense. Military vet, 80, shot at random on our streets. Stop the bloodshed. That's from the New York Post. They're conservative. They endorsed Eric Adams. New year, same fear. No let up from 2020 mayhem as bullets ring out after ball drops. That's from the Daily News, which you might be able to call the liberal counterpart, let's say. But in this category, they just so happen to be almost indistinguishable. How many times have you been shot walking down the streets of New York City?
Zero times. Zero?
Does being shot by the Democratic Party count?
A new article by Julie Hollar at Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting lays this all out. She writes that, looking just a bit farther back, you can see that New York is nowhere near its bad old days of crime. In 1993, the earliest year for which the NYPD provides year-to-date crime numbers, there were 718 murders at this point in the year, 3.7 times higher than today. In fact, the current number is just a hair higher than the 191 to this point in 2012, a year when murders reached a record low, and then Mayor Michael Bloomberg touted it as the safest big city in America. Now that's not to diminish those incidents of crime.
If we cover basic needs such as healthcare, including mental health care, housing, and food, those three things, I think that we would see a huge drop in crime.
And of course, crime does happen, and it's tragic. And yes, those shots from earlier were of Columbus Circle and the Upper East Side, which are very wealthy areas. Though, Eric Adams did receive thousands of votes from those areas. But the greater point is news informs how you understand and interact with the world and your community. It's not entertainment and it's not trivia. It affects your views and your choices and the way you engage as a citizen. That's why fake news, whatever you want to call it, is so harmful. Whether that's outright lying or lying by omission or lying by coverage that's wildly out of proportion, it all leads you to have concerns that don't fully map on to reality. So in this article, the crime statistics that get lots of coverage are juxtaposed with the housing statistics, which get obviously way less coverage. They searched the terms crime, affordable housing, supportive housing, rent control, or eviction from June 2020 through June 2021. The Daily News ran 1,365 stories that mentioned crime and only 166 that mentioned these housing crisis terms, a ratio of roughly 8-1. At the Post, the difference was closer to 10-1. This coverage disparity is of course an issue everywhere, locally and nationally. Have you ever struggled to pay rent?
Yes. I never couldn't pay rent, but I was very stressed about how I was going to be able to pay rent.
In fact, we just had to move to another neighborhood because we could not afford the apartment that we used to have.
Has your rent ever been more than half your income?
Definitely.
New Yorkers' odds of being severely rent burdened are about 1 in 6, and of being in extreme debt to a landlord about 1 in 9. By comparison, the chance of being murdered in New York City last year was less than 1 in 18,000. The chance of being shot was less than 1 in 5,000. As far as I know, none of the Daily News or New York Post articles being referenced in this piece lied or misrepresented statistics about crime or housing. The reporting might even have been really substantive or investigative. There could be journalism in there that Pulitzer Prizes were handed out for. I don't know. But it doesn't matter if these outlets are all ultimately doing a huge disservice to their communities, because taken in the aggregate, you have a complete misrepresentation of what plagues people more, which is not crime, but high rent and housing.